later in the dialogue that we're sharing in this class of the Phaedrus, in case you were wondering, Plato worries about this really radical technology called the pen. He's worried about this, believe it or not, because he's wondering what it will do to the relationship between teachers and students. I confess I'm a little bit concerned about what this idea of doing Moodle talks will do for our relationship as teacher and students. But we'll see. We'll try it out. I'm hoping to offer you a few cues as you read the palinode speech, the third speech in this dialogue. So I'm going to spend about 5 minutes talking with you about how to read the palinode and what's going on. Remember, this is called the take it back speech. Plato is having Socrates retract some of the things that he and, in a sense, Lysias have said in order to reform it, to correct it. It's not that he's repudiating everything, but he's correcting for some of the bad ideas that have been put forward in those very persuasive speeches. So what is Socrates talking about? Madness. Madness. He's interested in passion. He's interested in a way of living in which you're not totally rationally, procedurally in control. It's kind of like Socrates wants to go off the grid. He wants to go acoustic for the moment. He wants to get out of your calendar date book, out of your Microsoft Outlook way of living, and get out of the kind of professional mindset that is so important in so much of our lives, and to wake up to the fact that we're alive, that we've got a soul, that someday we're going to die. So he talks about madness. He talks about this impassioned way of living. It's interesting, for him, this impassioned way of living is called being a philosopher. You might think that sounds a little implausible. Being a philosopher means you wear a toga and you live in a cave somewhere and you write on scrolls. In any case, you're detached from real life, right? Well, not for Plato. As he depicts this philosophical life in Socrates, it's very passionate, it's very engaged, it's very much in the thick of life. And that also involves some messy things. That involves engagement in concerns that are a little uncomfortable. I frankly find some parts of this dialogue uncomfortable to talk about or to even to think about. He gives us, though, one of the most famous images in all of Western history, and that is the image of the soul as a chariot driven by two horses, a dark horse and a light horse. I'd like you to think about what those horses might mean and what that chariot might do for your understanding of your own life. Does it line up with your experience? Does it resonate with you? Do you say, yeah, sometimes I do feel like that chariot and those two horses? One of the things you have to be careful about, though, as you read this speech is that Plato is not giving us his creed. He's not sharing with us what he, quote-unquote, really thinks about reality. He is working Socrates the way a ventriloquist works a dummy. Socrates is sort of like his puppet here. And Phaedrus is another puppet. And he's working these two puppets in such a way that we might sort of wake up to our lives. But Plato, although he wants your soul, is never going to look you in the eye. And so we have to look at how Socrates relates to Phaedrus in this speech in order to figure out what Plato is trying to do. Socrates seems to be making a speech that he believes Phaedrus will like, that will interest Phaedrus, that will attract him, that will draw his eye. He's hoping that Phaedrus will be interested in this and drawn into it, and drawn farther into it than even Phaedrus would have expected. So as he talks about reincarnation, as he talks about the life of the gods, as he talks about the soul as a chariot and so forth, don't think of these as like Plato's Bible or something where he's sharing with us depictions of reality. They're more like the work of a storyteller, trying to craft a parable or something in order to make us think about our lives. So let me ask you, as you read the palinode, can you detect from what you know about Phaedrus, can you detect ways that Socrates is making his appeal to Phaedrus through this speech. The ways that he's crafting the speech in a way that would be interesting to Phaedrus. And finally, let me ask you, from what Socrates says about the body and about sexuality in this dialogue, can you get a sense of what Plato thinks about the body and about sexuality? And how might that line up with Christian teaching on sexuality and the body? And how might it diverge from Christian teaching as well? So those are a couple of pointers for you, a couple of questions to consider, and a couple of heads-ups for tomorrow's conversation. One final note. It would be deeply ironic if you read nothing but the Cliff Notes or the Spark Notes on this dialogue. You would be, in a sense, making a Phaedrus of yourself.